So you just found out you're going to be transferring to Huntsville, Alabama. My family's actually been there before, so this is going to be a one-stop shop to walk you through the process of making that relocation with the Bureau. My wife's a Bureau employee. A few years ago, she received orders to report here in 90 days. Oddly enough, during that period, there was a government shutdown, so some of you may be facing that pretty soon too. And so we had a kind of a hurry up offense once the government reopened, because while it's closed, there was nobody at OPM for us to talk to. Had to research all this on our own, so I want to use that information and that experience to kind of help educate you, make the process a little easier for you. Concurrent with that, I'm actually a real estate broker here in Huntsville. I'm Cameron Walker Realty, and my brokerage is boutique, and we specialize in helping people relocate to the area. And I've helped quite a few BU families as well. You're under no obligation to work with me. I want this to be informational for you guys, so that's going to be the end of my pitch on me. This is really a no BS guide, so I'm going to go very quickly through a lot of different topics. I'm going to title each one as a chapter, so if you scroll along at the bottom, you'll find the chapter that pertains to you. So if you're looking to buy a home, you don't need to read the rental and vice versa, right? Also, I want this to be a live resource for you, a true playbook. So that includes the video, the description, and then any comments you guys make. So any of the chapters I talk about, they're going to be highlighted down below. Any links, any data I provide, any resources, they're going to be linked below as well. And then your comments are going to be really informative. I'm sure there's something I'll get incorrect, or something's updated or changed, and I'm looking at outdated data or forms or whatever, right? Let me know that in the comment section. Diamonds are cut, not polished. I want the straight dope. Tell me what I got wrong. If you have additional resources, or I overlook something, or I don't spend enough time on something, mention that in the comments as well. I can add that to the resources that I have down there. And then if you have questions, definitely put them down there. I want to create a FAQ over time as well. So I'm going to be coming back to this video time and time again, updating it with new information, okay? Also, I'm going to have a pinned comment that'll have some additional information for you guys, so definitely check that out as well. All right, housekeeping out of the way, let's dive into this. First thing I want to talk about is relocation benefits. Some of you may be aware or not that OPM and different agencies, bureaus, organizations may offer some relocation benefits. A lot of times they don't, but I want you to ask about them, see if you're qualified for them, see if they are going to offer them to you, because it covers a lot of the expenses of making that move. So there's really two types of relocation benefits. One is an incentive, where they pay you up front for making the move. The other is a reimbursement for some of the expenses you incur during the move. So expenses that I've seen reimbursed in the past are movers, closing costs. In some cases, they will even purchase your home, or the relocation company they use will purchase your home. Recently, I've seen less of that. I actually haven't seen that in quite a while. I've seen more that they will pair you with a realtor, give a certain amount of time, all that. But at the end of the day, that house still has to sell before you move. And not all expenses are reimbursable. So like closing costs typically are, but there's two portions of closing cost. One is your bank and title company related fees. The other are prepaid items like taxes, homeowners insurance, transfer fees, HOA, proration. So those things they typically don't reimburse you for. So if you're working with a lender as part of your purchase, you definitely want to talk to one that's well versed in these relocations, so they put the right expenses where they belong, so you can maximize your reimbursement, also without getting into trouble by putting things where they shouldn't belong, right? So who qualifies for reimbursement? Well, at the end of the day, it's your management chain that's going to decide that, but there are some baseline things you need to know. The amount of reimbursement or incentive that you qualify for is tiered based on how long you've been with the government and active duty. So it's from 1 to 4 years. Anything after 4, you're still just getting what you would get in your 4th year. And basically, it goes up by a quarter of your salary over time. So if you make $100K, just as an example, right? In your first year, you'd qualify for $25K of relocation benefits. In your second year, 50, third, 75, 4th year, the full 100, okay? Some other gating factors are if you're currently under a service agreement period for previous incentive or reimbursement that you received. So let's say you were recently hired 2 years ago, and you had a 4-year service agreement to receive the benefits that you got when you were recruited. You're still within that time frame. You no longer qualify, or you don't qualify for relocation assistance incentive reimbursement. Now, there may be ways around this. It might be something where you can get an exception, but The baseline policy says you don't. Same thing if you're in your service agreement period for a previous relocation. So if you moved from Arizona to DC and now you're coming to Huntsville, but you're still under that service agreement period for DC, you technically do not qualify for the relocation assistance. So that may be something you have to talk with your management chain about, see if you can get an exception. And that's assuming, again, they're offering this to anybody. So those are the gating factors. If you have a retention agreement, like where you were given an incentive for retention, that does not exclude you. So those are kind of the three incentives they offer: recruiting, relocation, and retention. Retention is the only one of the three that doesn't preclude you from getting these incentives. All right, something else you need to know, any incentive you get is it's taxed as part of your wages. So if you moved 10 years ago with the Bureau, it was untaxed. But in 2018, the laws changed, and now the IRS does tax you on any reimbursement or incentive that you get as part of your relocation package. So you definitely need to know that. And forgive me if I look down, I'm checking out my notes to make sure I don't overlook anything. So that's kind of the big touch points when it comes to the relocation packages. Sometimes if you're getting these relocation packages, they're going to dictate a relocation company that you work with, and that company is going to dictate which agents that you work with. They have a calculus as to which agents qualify, and it's years they've been in the business, number of transactions, dollar volume, and their customer service rating. I exceed all of those gating factors with every single relocation company. So if you do want to work with somebody at my brokerage, you can throw us in. But again, you don't have to. You can work with whomever you like. This information is for you. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is pay, right? So the two big financial factors are your relocation package if you get one, and then the change in pay. So I went out and pulled the GS pay scale for like base pay just across the U.S., what Huntsville's Locality Pay is, and then what the DC Locality Pay is, to give you an idea and a range of what you could be looking at. I'm going to use a GS12 step 1 as like my baseline for this for comparison. That way we all know what we're looking at. And of course these will all be linked below and you have access to them through your own channels. So if you're in the US, you're 12 step 1, your base pay is $75K roughly. If you're in Huntsville as a GS12 step 1, your base pay plus your locality pay is going to be $92,000. And if you're in DC, same thing, 12 step 1, you're about 101. So Huntsville kind of falls right in the middle there between the very base and some of the higher cost of living areas. So that's what you can expect, and then that's going to scale up or down depending on what your GS level and steps are. So that is an absolute number. Let's talk about it relative to expenses here. This is something I've done a lot of videos on. I'll link them below as well, but I'm well versed in it because I've done it so many times. So we're going to talk about the cost of living in Huntsville relative to some other areas. On average, Huntsville ranks anywhere between 8% to 13% lower than the national average for cost of living. Why is there a spread? Well, different companies that do this look at different numbers, different factors. Numbers change over time and they're not always in sync. So you may have the average for the US may change and then Huntsville may lag by 2 months or vice versa, right? The areas where you're going to see the most difference between the biggest delta in Huntsville between like the cost of living here and elsewhere, number one is going to be housing. We're typically, whether you're buying or renting, we're lower than the national average when it comes to housing, and it can be by a significant amount depending on the time of year and what's going on. Taxes are also a huge difference. So Alabama has a lot of individual taxes: gas taxes, personal property taxes, property taxes as far as like your home ownership, income taxes. But even in aggregate, they're very low, even though you pay so many. So sales tax, things like that. So when you're coming here from somewhere else, if it doesn't have property tax but has a high income tax, you may still be better off here and likely will, even though you pay more individual taxes, right? But that's a big differentiator between here and elsewhere. And I'll get into specific property taxes and things like that in a few minutes when I get into the home ownership piece. Another thing is insurance. If you're coming here from a coastal area, you guys are just getting obliterated with insurance right now, if you can even get it, right? So insurance here is typically going to be less expensive than what you see in those coastal areas or anywhere that's seeing natural disasters. We're not that far from the coast. We're about 6 hours inland, but if there's a hurricane, by the time it gets up here, it's an inland hurricane. It's a really bad thunderstorm. It maybe a tropical storm, but we're not seeing the wind and wave devastation that you'd see in coastal Alabama, Florida, places like that. So our insurance is considerably lower. We do have personal property taxes for things like cars, boats. I know that varies depending on where you are, but it goes down over time with the value of the vehicle. It is based off of that. And we have a lot of tax incentives for people here. So those could be based on disability status, age, home ownership status, if it's your primary residence or not. So, there's a lot of different ways to save money on taxes in Alabama. A lot of people that move here, particularly government jobs actually, are making their last move before going into retirement, and their plan is to retire in Alabama. And I have videos on this specifically, but just kind of give you a high level overview. Alabama doesn't tax Social Security income. It doesn't tax most defined benefit plans, so pensions. They've started waiving a good chunk of income from taxes on 401k and IRA distributions. So it started off at 6,000, it went to 12, it'll go up to 18, it'll cap out in the year 2026 income at 24,000. And that's per individual. So if you're a married household and you're both drawing from your 401k or IRA, you could be excluding up to $48,000 in income, and we're not even talking about your pension or Social Security yet. Health insurance in Alabama is relatively inexpensive compared to some other areas. It's higher than some others, but in retirement, it's actually pretty low. So in Alabama in general, from border to border, doesn't have the best health care. The major cities in Alabama are far above average, though. So Huntsville, Birmingham, places like that, you're going to see better care than what you would see elsewhere in the country in many cases. All right, so it kind of gives you a quick rundown of that. Utilities here are generally lower than other areas. We have hydroelectric as well as a little bit of nuclear power, so that keeps our prices down. We have a lot of waterways that are dammed here, so our power's made very locally. We have natural gas off the coast, so natural gas is fairly inexpensive. Gasoline significantly less expensive than on the coast because it's refined in the southeast. It's not shipped very far. We don't have as much demand as other areas, and supply and demand always drives prices too, because we have a little bit lower population base. Like I think Alabama's population is slightly over 5 million last time I checked, and I had somebody move here from San Diego a couple years ago, and he said that's how many people were in his county. So if you look at, they're having to ship gas over there on trucks, tankers, whatever, they're sucking up a lot more of that gas than we are here as an entire state. So our gas prices are relatively low, sometimes dollars lower than other parts of the country. Groceries are typically a little bit lower than the national average here. Again, we have a lot of agriculture in the area, not just in Huntsville, but around the southeast, great growing seasons. So, foods tend to be a little bit more fresh. They're easier to get here. They don't have to be stored as long. So that cost savings is typically passed on through the grocery stores. So that gives you an idea. Vehicles run about average for the nation, so you're not getting any kind of great savings there unless you're in somewhere where they're significantly more expensive than the average. And those are kind of the big ticket items that most people look at, right? So again, 8 to 13% is kind of the average I see across different websites and tools that we use to look at cost of living, and I'll include those links down below so you can look at where you live versus here, right? And I've done other videos, so I'll link those as well. And forgive me while I check my notes. So next thing I want to talk about is the home buying experience. So we'll talk about home buying on one end, and we'll talk about rentals after that, okay? So if you're looking at buying a home when you move here, there's different facets we need to talk about. We need to talk about the home buying trip. We need to talk about if you need to sell a home where you're at, how that process looks, what financing looks like, new versus used. So the number one thing I need you to know, and I'll link to this below as well, is that Alabama is a buyer beware state. If you're coming here from the DC metro area or somewhere else, you may very well have a lot of buyer protection laws, and we just don't have those in Alabama. Doesn't mean that it's unsafe to buy a home in Alabama. Millions of people have done it, but I want you to know what you're getting into so we can make sure you stay safe. So what does that mean? Sellers don't have to disclose very much about a home. They only need to disclose health or safety issues. So if there's loose asbestos, stairs that are rotted, mold in the home that they're aware of, they have to disclose that, but we're on the honor system. And I think you and I both know how well that system works typically. If they're a real estate agent selling a home, they have more onus for disclosure. And if we ask any specific questions about the home, so let's say we ask the age of the roof or the HVAC or the water heater, or if there's ever been water intrusion or foundation issues, they owe us an honest response. But again, we're on the honor system. And it's very difficult to determine if somebody lied about something. So they owe us an honest response, and sometimes that response may be, I don't know and I don't have access to that information. It might be the third owner of a home, they don't know the age of the roof. So then the onus is on us to discover the roof's condition through inspections. In some areas of the country, you can get out of a contract for virtually anything during the inspection period. In the Huntsville area, it's going to be more limited to structural elements in the home, health and safety, termite damage, radon, and the function of the subsystems in the home, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. So just to give you an idea there, you can't just say, oh, decided I don't want this house anymore and just get out of a contract. Alabama contracts are a lot tighter than that. And if you buy an as-is home, it doesn't matter what's wrong with it. The Alabama Supreme Court has upheld that is a sale. You're not allowed to get out of it. So, of course, there's ramifications if you do get out of it. We would talk about that on an individual basis, but just want to put that out there. Looking at homes is really important when we go and we look at them and we look at the condition and we ask the right questions and we have the right inspections to make sure you're protected. Another way around this is to buy new construction homes. I see a lot of people go this route. With new construction homes, there's a little bit more onus on builders legally, and you have all the warranties, all the new pieces, all that. So if that's the direction you wanted to go, again, we would have a more detailed discussion about production builders versus custom, ground up versus spec, all that, how that financing works and everything. And I do have videos that I've done on that. I'll link them below as well. And then if you're looking at buying a resale home, typically resale purchase here runs about 30 days from contract to close. Last I looked, we had almost 5,000 homes on the ground between resale and new construction, so we have a lot of inventory. We have started to eat into that with more of you guys moving here, and potentially, and I say potentially because this is waffled for 5 years, Space Command coming here, we could see a lot of that inventory eaten into. We're already eating into it a little bit this spring. Following the election, we've definitely seen an uptick in buyers, but we're going to eat into some of it, but for the near future, we're definitely going to have inventory to look at. So this is a huge benefit for you. It means two things. That we have more homes that'll probably fit within what you're looking for, and it gives us better bargaining power. With that said, if a home's been on the market for about 90 days, we have much better bargaining power than if a home just went on the market 2 days ago and it's priced appropriately, it shows well. Some of those homes are still getting 3, 4, 5 offers on the first weekend, okay? So I say that so that you understand we have a broad range in the market of pricing, condition, desirability, and competition. So if a home went on the market yesterday and it's priced right and it's getting a lot of showings, and you go in with a 10% offer, 10% below asking, in many cases it's not even going to reply. They're not going to negotiate back because they got 3 other offers. Why are they going to deal with you? Now if a home's been on the market for 90 days, now we can start talking about getting offer below asking, requesting closing costs, some other provisions in there, right? So, just understand we're running a spread. There's a gradient there that we move across, depending on several factors. New construction, a lot more straightforward. Some builders negotiate, some don't. Depends on their strength in the market. There are builders, I swear, they'll go out of business before they negotiate. And there's some that are pretty easy to work with. All of them offer some kind of incentive. It's usually tied to the use of either the lender they own outright or a lender that they favor. So just bear that in mind. If you want to use your own lender, you can, but you may lose out on that builder incentive. I have a lot of lenders I work with in the area that I've worked with in the past. My clients have had great experience with. They deliver great service. They're competitive on rate, fee, and program. So if you need recommendations, let me know. But I'm agnostic when it comes to home inspector, lender, insurance, title company. I have people I work with and I recommend in all those areas. And the only way they can get on my list is if they get good experience. As soon as they start falling off or we start having problems, they go off my list. I don't get any kind of kickback or anything like that. They're strictly there because they deliver excellent service. So I do have people I recommend, but as long as you deal with somebody licensed and that's who you want to work with, you are more than welcome to find who you want. And again, that's lender, home inspector, termite company, insurance company, whatever you need, whatever vendor you may want. So just bear in mind that they do need to be licensed in the state of Alabama for these things. All right. So financing, we covered, there's so many different programs available in Alabama. And if it's been a while since you bought a house, there's going to be a lot of differences. So when I say a while, if it's been 10 years since you bought a home, the whole lending world has changed since then. There's new programs available and programs within programs. Like you have conventional, FHA, USDA, VA. There's sub programs underneath that. And so it's really cool. It's a lot more granularity. It allows you to have a much more custom fit for the financing. But you also need a loan officer that's both well versed in those and willing to do the work to show you the different options. And that's part of the lenders I pick. Because there's a lot of lenders, they're going to say, oh, you qualify for X. And it's like, that's all they show you. And it's a hassle on their end to go to their computer system or run different scenarios. So they just don't do it. And the lenders I work with will, because I want to make sure you get into the right program for you. So let's say you need to sell a home before you move down here, right? So if you don't have to sell a home, great, that's easy, right? It's a much more traditional process. If you do need to sell a home, some things we could do on your end. We can make your offer down here contingent upon your home selling. We could wait for your home to sell, put you in short-term housing. You could rent for a year before you buy something. If it's more of a case of you want to use the money from from the sale of your home as a down payment, you're confident your home will sell, but and you're willing to take on the risk of potentially it not selling immediately and you having two mortgages for a while, and that's totally at your discretion. I don't want to influence that. I just want to tell you how to do it if that's the route you decide to go. I've done it in the past myself. So in that case, you could pull money from, like, say, a TSP account or retirement account. In those cases, like, you're paying yourself back. Yes, there's an interest rate, but you're paying yourself the interest. But you can borrow from those to buy a home, pay yourself back when your home sells. Bridge loans, where you take the equity out of your current home and use it to the next one, really uncommon these days. Between where interest rates are and just loan programs in general, there's very few banks offering that. I haven't had anybody do it in 4 years. I've had a few people look at it, just never wound up being favorable. I've had people borrow from family, things like that. And I've had something really cool recently with some government relos where they needed to sell their home. They were going to put a big down payment on the new house. They came for an area tour. They weren't 100% sure they wanted to move. Got here, found a house they loved. They decided to go ahead and make an offer. But now they've still got to sell that home on the other end to get the money, right? And they're not prepared to do that yet. It's going to take them a couple of weeks to get that home on the market. By the time they get it under contract and close, they're already going to be closing on a house here. So what they do for that is a recast or reamortization, where a few months after they close, they bring that bulk of that money that they were going to plan on putting down. They can now put it against their principal balance. Their payment is reduced. It's not a refinance with all the fees and a different interest rate and all that. It's as if you made that down payment initially. Thing is, like, the last one I heard about was like a $500 fee for somebody to do that. I had some friends do it last year. I've had other clients do it over the years. So it's a really good way to kind of mitigate that situation and get what you want if you decide to move more quickly. Again, I don't want to influence your decision in doing so. I just want to give you the options available so you can make an informed decision. All right, and I'm sorry if I'm going off so fast. I just want to make sure I don't miss any information. So that's another way of doing it. And again, if you need to go contingent upon the sale of your home, I get it. If you qualify carrying both mortgages, or you can be a cash buyer, those are all good options. So cash is always king when making offers because there's just less that can go wrong. I still like to put provisions in our offers, particularly if you're financing. We want to make sure it appraises. We want to protect you. While yes, our market's getting hotter and hotter during the spring here, we're nowhere near those 2020, 2021 levels where agents were telling people to waive all these contingencies. I'm not a fan of waived contingencies anyway, particularly in Alabama where it's a buyer beware state. So if you waive all your contingencies, you effectively buy a home as is by default, and if there's problems, you have no recourse. So I want to keep your contingencies intact so you're protected when you make a purchase. And all of my agents work under that assumption, right? We're not the kind of people or agents that are going to push you into a bad situation. There's 5,000 homes. We'll find the right one. We'll find a deal that works for you and get you to into a home under the terms that you feel comfortable with, right? We're not in a situation where there's only going to be one house that works. So based on my experience in our brokerage helping people relocate here, I would say about 70% of people find a home on their house hunting trip within 2 days. So typically day one, we're going to spread out the area unless you've really narrowed something down. We're going to have a relocation consultation, find out what's important to you in the house, the area, the community, amenities, commute, school district, extracurricular activities, all that, right? Then we're going to narrow that down to some areas that'll work for you and your price point, and then we'll go tour those areas. We'll look at a house or two in each area, and we'll reference back to the map that we talk about during your relocation consultation so that you have a sense of, oh, okay, this is where the grocery store is. Here's where the gate to get on the arsenal is. Here's where, my kid's school would be. And that way you can kind of triangulate things while we're out live looking at houses. So typically that first day, sometimes we find the right house, but usually it's more exploratory. Once we've been out, seen homes with you, get a sense and see things through your eyes, we can go back to the MLS and eliminate a lot of houses. You know, we're like, okay, this one's too open concept or not open enough, or this backyard wouldn't work for them, whatever, right? Then we can narrow it down. And typically on day 2 is when we find the home. About 70% of people find homes in those first 2 days, get under contract. Another 20% or so get under contract that first week. It's usually a house we found on day 1 or day 2. Maybe we waited to make an offer because we wanted to look at something else, or we made an offer and we're negotiating back and forth with the seller and it takes a little more time. About 10%, just what they want isn't on the market. And they're being really selective. They kind of have a unicorn in mind. And, you know, as part of that relocation consultation, we'll tell you directly if it's just not something you're going to be able to find. You know, if that doesn't exist, you know, you want a 20-acre property with a mansion on it for $100,000, well, that doesn't exist, and we're not going to waste your time or ours doing that. But if it's something that comes along periodically, well, then we just need to be patient, and we need to look at a structure and a plan to make sure you have temporary housing, but that you can still jump on that property when it does become available. And we can kind of look at historic norms. If 10 of those properties come on a year and 5 of them come on in the spring, then we can say, you know, realistically, we would expect a couple more to come on in the coming months. So we don't want a year lease, we want a 3-month lease, right? So there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice that. So it really comes down to your unique situation and what you're looking for and what the market's going to give us. But I want to let you know that's kind of the process. So we have a high-level overview. That's our relocation consultation. We narrow down to the areas that are going to be of most interest to you. We do an area tour, house hunting trip, and then we find the right house, get it under contract, and typically it's 30 days from contract to closing. Of course, there can be extenuating circumstances, negotiated terms, or it could be new construction that lasts a little longer. All right, so that kind of gives you an idea on the house hunting, financing, what to do if you need to buy before you sell, or vice versa. We have a lot of different options, and we're going to tailor that to you and make sure you understand what you're getting into before you sign anything. Speaking of signing things, there has been a big change in agent compensation laws this past year. So in 2024, there was a big settlement between National Association of Realtors and some people that sued them over agent compensation. In some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. So it used to be we put the agent compensation in MLS, so we knew what the seller was offering as far as a percentage or a flat fee of the sale, for a buyer's agent bringing a buyer to that home. Nowadays we're no longer allowed to do that. Good news is then it becomes part of the negotiation, so you have more control over that. But before we go see a house, I have to have you sign a buyer agency agreement saying I'm representing you and disclosing what my fees are going to be. In that document, it's going to say that you owe me those fees. I've never had a buyer pay me the fee after hundreds upon hundreds of buyers, and even over this past year. We negotiate that into our offer. So if we make an offer for $100,000 and we ask for a 3% commission for me or one of my agents, and the seller doesn't agree to that, it is either a decline or a counteroffer. The ball's back in your court to make what decision you want to make. You're never obligated to do something you haven't agreed to in that specific contract, even though you've signed a buyer's agency agreement with us. Very lax on buyer agency agreements, but not all brokerages are. Some will hold you to the letter of every single dotted I in there. I don't want a hostage, right? So if our agent or brokerage doesn't click with you, there's something happens, something changes, as long as it's not a home we already have under contract or we've shown you in the last 30 days, we have an easy out policy, okay? And we'll write that into it so that you understand, it's in black and white, we've all signed off on it, you're not just going off our word. But not every brokerage offers that. Quite a few of them have kind of leveraged this change to ask for more money or hold buyers' feet to the fire because they don't want to drive you around town for 3 weeks and have you not buy something with them. So just be aware of what you're getting into no matter what agent you work with. If you work with a listing agent on something, they may not require you to sign it, but then they can't represent you. So you're going to do everything on your own, from paperwork to scheduling to negotiations to closing, okay? If you have a buyer's agent, we're going to handle most of that for you. All right. We also in Alabama have a transaction agent, which is they're just a paper pusher, not in a negative way, but if you and the seller kind of are negotiating on your own or maybe even know each other or something like that, that transaction broker is just going to facilitate the paperwork and get into closing and scheduling of things. but they're not going to advise you on anything. They're not going to negotiate on your behalf or the other sides. They're really just a middleman to make sure everything goes smooth, gets to closing. So those are three of the four types, or I should say two of the four types of agency in Alabama. The third one that's common is limited dual consensual agent. That means if they're the listing agent or brokerage for a property and you're the buyer, and either the same agent or the same brokerage represents both sides, you need to be notified of that in advance, right? So that you're not going in blind to that. Now, we still owe fiduciary duty to each client. I can't tell somebody that your max budget's X or that seller's minimum budget is Y. I can't tell you that. I don't like to do dual agency if I don't have to. If it were to come down to it and it was a listing in my brokerage, we don't do a ton of listings. We work almost exclusively with buyers, but sometimes we do have listings. We would notify you and we'd have two different agents run the transaction so that they're not cross-pollinating on that. But there's a fourth type of agency that almost nobody does. It's sub-agency. It's where one agent works under another agent who works for you. And I don't mean they're not in the same brokerage. They're across two different brokerages. So I have not seen that here in the 4 or 5 years I've been selling homes. So I know South Alabama, it's a little more common, but even there it's somewhat rare. So it gives you an idea of the different types of agency, the compensation, how we make offers. When we make an offer, we put in the terms. It's your purchase price, your closing date, the type of financing you want to do, the earnest money, any additional provisions like inspections or appraisal contingencies, anything like that goes into the offer. And again, if the seller doesn't accept the offer as is, it is at worst a counter offer, and then the ball's in your court to make a decision about accepting what they counter offer, making any additional changes, or walking away. Nobody can force you into signing anything. So that's kind of, if we're buying a home, these are, some of the terms and contracts we want to think about. So let's talk about rentals. Rental market in Huntsville is a little different than some other major cities, right? So in some cities, an agent makes their entire living on showing rental properties and bringing renters to a rental property. It's not how it works in Huntsville. If I brought you to a rental property, I don't make any money. Sometimes like $100 or something like that. But if I go show 30 properties and I only make $100, like I go, bankrupt really quickly, right? So in our market, you typically don't have agents that specialize in rentals unless they represent a property management company, in which case they're going to turn the locks, provide the rental agreements and all that for the properties they represent. And so that's pretty common. There's a couple of really large ones. There's several smaller ones. There's also some independent landlords where you deal directly with them. I would say if you're looking for a house to rent, the absolute best resource is actually Zillow. I don't typically push people towards Zillow because there's a lot of misinformation on there. But in this case, they're going to have the broadest swath of properties available. Then if you're looking for an apartment, something like apartment.com or something like that, you're going to deal directly with the leasing agency. My brokerage, we do have some listings for one apartment that's upcoming, but even then we're listing in the MLS, we're making an initial contact, but any leasing decision, negotiation, paperwork's done with that apartment complex. We're just assisting them with getting it listed and fielding incoming calls. So in most cases, you're going to deal directly either with the landlord, the listing agency, or the property manager for these things. Now, let's say we're looking for a home and you need a short-term housing. I'm going to be more assistance there, right? I'm going to help you find an Airbnb or some kind of short-term housing option that we can dive into there. I know of a lot of corporate housing. Most of those are furnished, so I can get you information for those as well. Again, you're going to sign the lease with them, not with me, but at least I can get you pointed in the right direction where you can make the right contacts. Alabama, particularly in the Huntsville area, I kind of think of Huntsville as being like 5 distinct areas. There's Southeast Huntsville, Southwest, Central Huntsville, Northeast, Northwest. And even within those, there's smaller, neighborhoods and communities. But those are kind of the 5 areas I think about Huntsville proper. And then you have the surrounding suburbs. So far southeast, you've got New Hope, very rural. You get a lot of house and land for the money. Then you've got Owens Crossroads, really up and coming area, a lot of nice houses there. You've got Hampton Cove, one of the higher end areas, also known as FBI Cove. Bailey Cove over there. So those are areas, a lot of new construction, quite a bit of existing homes, but it's not nearly as densely populated as other suburbs around Huntsville. Beautiful mountain views over there, stunning valley, tons of outdoor activities, great area. Going up from there, you kind of have Brownsboro, Northeast Huntsville, Newmarket. Beautiful areas there, a lot of growth in those areas. Not as much traffic generally, especially locally. From there, you keep going due north of Huntsville, you got Meridianville. Then just off of that, you've got Hazel Green and Tony. Those are areas where we're seeing a lot of residential growth. There's still a ton of farmland out there. Then coming down, you got Harvest, Madison. Both of those have grown quite a bit. Madison's a sea of neighborhoods, from sea to shining sea. It's where I live and know a lot of people there. I've helped a lot of buyers there. Felt buyers from all these areas. And then outside of that, you've got like Decatur, Athens, Elkmont, Southern Tennessee, and then all the way over to Scottsboro, and then south of the river too. So that kind of gives you a broad area. And depending on where you're looking, it's going to determine what you can find at what price, whether it's new, used, whether there's land with it, whether it's on septic or sewer, whether it has a basement or not. Basements aren't super common here, but you tend to see them more in select areas. So depending on what your needs are, what you want, it's going to determine a lot of that. But then you got to start looking at, what's my commute? Is this the right school district? Are there things I want to do outside of work around here? So, I've had people that they have restrictive diets, I'm not saying that in a negative context, just saying what it is. And they need to be closer to Whole Foods or Sprouts or Aldi or something like that. And that may supersede some of the other things they need. So in that relocation consultation, we're going to kind of list out what's really important to you about the house, about your budget, about your commute, and all these other factors. And not necessarily saying we're going to rank them, but I understand there are things that are deal breakers and things that are not. And so we're going to focus on finding things that are obviously outside of that deal breaker category and as many of the other things that you want and need as we can find. But sometimes it may be that there's very rarely a perfect tone. We're usually giving something up to gain something else. So just keep that in mind when we're looking. And we're going to shoot you straight on that. I don't want to waste 3 days of your time looking at homes when I know it doesn't exist. And I know you don't want to either, particularly if you're under a time crunch to get here. So that gives you an idea of kind of that rental process, as well as, geolocating, right? What we want to be around and what we need to be near. So again, I want you guys to use the comments, all those sections down below. Let me know what questions you have, corrections, provide additional resources, and I'll update the video description accordingly, as well as that pinned comment. So hopefully we'll be able to help you get down here. I hope it's a smooth move for you, regardless of who you use. And if you need help finding an agent where you're at to sell your home, definitely let me know. I've got a ton of contacts up there. A lot of agents I've worked with in the past, people I've referred clients to. I used to be part of a much larger brokerage that had a big presence up there, so I know a lot of those agents as well. And I only put you with people that are really good at their job. And here's what I mean by that. When you're making a purchasing decision down here, but it's hinging on information you get from, say, DC or some other area, we need a agent on that side that knows what they're doing and knows how to communicate. I have had situations where the seller got such a strong offer with no conditions, cash offer, quick close, that we decided on this end to move forward with a purchase faster than we otherwise would have. I've also had a situation where it was kind of a weak offer. There were a lot of contingencies, maybe even a home to sell contingency, and their buyer was home to sell, right? It becomes a chain reaction where anything could go wrong in that process, and suddenly my client here can't buy. So knowing that you're working with an agent that knows these things, knows the strength of the offer you have, can communicate that clearly, gets to us quickly, definitely informs what we do on this side. And that's hyper important. So if you have somebody you trust, absolutely work with them, right? Like, I want you to use who you're comfortable with. If you don't, let me know, and I'll be glad to help you find somebody so that we make sure we put you in the best position moving forward down here. So my contact information, as well as other agents in my office, are down below in the description. Reach out to us with any questions. Thanks for watching.